Thank you for joining us today. The AI Word Series is about real stories, real lives, and how AI is everywhere all at once, in business and in life. Lifescape, as I often reference. The premise of the Word Series is that not everything is new. These are words that we've used in many cases since childhood, but they have a different context today in the age of AI. The Word Series is designed to highlight the letters AI in the words that we've come to know and how we might level up with the lens of AI. Our word this week is appraisal. And with me, I'm happy to have Chris Williams, president of AIMS Dashboard. I need to credit LinkedIn for Chris and I connecting over the course of the last year, and I'm so glad we did. While Chris has been in the appraisal space for many years, he had the recent distinction of facilitating the first UAD 3.6 production appraisal and its acceptance from the GSEs. Yes, the very first one. It's a big deal in the appraisal space. So congratulations, Chris.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for joining us. And tell us, what else should we know about you?
Well, thanks for having me. Well, there's one other professional distinction, and that is that we also quickly thereafter, with the advent of a standardized data set, exercised MISMO's procurement specification. And we were able to pass the data that typically is re-entered from an assignment to an appraiser into their appraisal form. In the age of UAD 3.6, we passed that along electronically, and the appraiser was able to start their appraisal without having to rekey any entry. So that was another distinction, and I'm proud of that.
Well,
For him, it was a non-event. He's like, "Hey, Chris, nothing happened." Well, that's good.
perfect. Yeah.
Yes.
That means it executed exactly as designed, right?
But yeah, as far as a background, I did grow up in a real estate family. My dad was a developer. He's been a mortgage banker. He's been an appraiser. He's an appraiser instructor. So I've seen everything from faxed rate sheets to glue sticks and 1-hour photos in the appraisal space. So I've been around both sides of the bridge, so to speak.
So let's jump in right there. And you make me smile. I started with the fax machine and the curled up paper as well.
That's right.
Back in the day, that's how we used to get rate sheets. So how has in turn, when you hear the word appraisal, what's the first moment or image that comes to mind in the context of AI and appraisal?
So AI is about intelligence. And it seems like that, there's a telltale sign that you're an information or a knowledge worker if you use a keyboard, and maybe these days a touch screen. But, if you're using some sort of input device, or if you're looking at something as your mode of work, intelligence and information knowledge are probably part of what you do. And I think that with appraisal, I think what we think about as an appraisal in the appraiser community, we think of it as two different things. And often there's a bit of a debate on which one you're talking about if there's not that distinction. One is the opinion of value. The other is the thing that you use to communicate your opinion of value, the appraisal.
There's the research, right?
That's
And
the
as
research.
well as the documentation and the end product that is delivered to the consumer, to the lender, whatever that process may be.
That's exactly right. And so as an appraiser, looking at the AI and appraisal, if I'm a knowledge worker and AI can help with that, then I think about all of the things that are just what I might call monkey business. One of my friends told me about that. And he said, "Hey, Chris, if you're just punching stuff into the keys, you're doing monkey business instead of the intellectual part." And so if the appraisal really is that opinion of value, and that professional impact that an appraiser has is experience and methodology to be able to form a defendable opinion of value, then the more I can work on that piece instead of this monkey business stuff, the better I can kind of exercise my craft and maybe even do it a little bit better because I have more time. If I'm fixed time to get this appraisal to a client, am I able to spend more time coming up with my opinion of value instead of finding the data and sticking it into a way that I can communicate that to my client? And I think AI can help with that.
Well, I was going to say, I think you strike on a great point because in the context of artificial intelligence, we're often talking about where it does very well is minimizing the manual input and allowing people to level up from that knowledge base, the things that AI is not necessarily very good at, and keeping that human in the loop. And how do we adjust our processes to that human to stay in the loop and providing that oversight and that judgment and that geographic competence even comes to mind, because there are things that data may not say, but that the individual human reference point brings another layer into the equation.
Absolutely. The unseen, if we're looking at talking about computer vision as an example, the stuff that's seen or seen in context, the context that provides that vision of that local unique property and its placement. The human in the middle is an interesting topic to me, specifically to appraisal, because appraisers have for a long time been the human in the middle. We've had AVMs in play for quite a number of years. And even before that, looking at tax records and tax values, yeah, a bank could have gone and sometimes would go with that information in extending credit for a real estate. But the human appraiser was sent out there to verify that these data points that were floating around at that time on paper down at the courthouse, but they would go out and they would gather these facts. And as I look forward, I think that what I see AI helping appraisers do, and the role of the appraiser, is moving from data creation to data curation.
I like that. Okay, talk to us about that. What's that mean?
So, the data already exists. A lot of the data already exists. There might be a couple of measurements or unique characteristics of a property that somebody needs to put into the dataverse. But absent of that, a lot of it exists. And if you were to look at Redfin, look at MLS, which is often, pick any of the real estate prop tech platforms out there that have data and that they're gathering the data. And then, of course, the GSEs have an enormous database associated with it. So instead of, if there are ways that we can reinvent the workflow, look at it from, we're going to be curating this data instead of creating it. Let's spend the time looking at managing by exception. What has changed? So if there's a historic appraisal from 3 years ago and we're refinancing or some sort of event is causing me to change that loan in some shape or fashion, do we have to start from scratch again? There's a little durability to these real estate aspects. And, there are three things that put a loan together: the mortgage lender, the borrower, and the collateral securing that loan. And the collateral is probably the most durable of the three. And so, sure, you might have add-ons. You might have a tree fall on the house. There might be repairs. There might be deferred maintenance. But that's something that is a change as opposed to brand new. Of course.
An update, right? It's context of most current information, and even in the context of AI and how might it be helping, it's not necessarily visible, but on the backside of the equation, to call the information from the variable databases that an appraiser is accustomed to having to go and search the availability of that information. So many pieces that an appraiser needs to have relationship with comes from things that are outside of your control. For example, a given county, and are those records accessible? And if
Yes.
they are accessible, are they even up to date? All of those nuances, right? And how many
Yes.
phone calls do they actually have to make? So ideally, in the greater scope of AI, that it's not just a matter of an appraiser leveling up and utilizing differently, but it's also this AI everywhere all at once, where towns, village, communities, and recordings and all of the things that have an impact or could have a potential impact on an appraisal at a given point, that these things become more readily available. So once again, they can actually produce a report faster with
Absolutely.
equal or greater accuracy.
That's right. That's right. And so that curation is, hey, how do I take a data point and make sure that data point is the fact? Data points aren't always facts. They might have been a fact at one time.
That's a great call. I think you're absolutely right. And I think it also extends to the aspect about artificial intelligence in general, right? That there's a saying that says data is the new oil.
Yes.
And then there's that was quote was put out, I think, early 2000s. But then the current version of it says that expert data is the new fuel.
Yes.
So
Yes.
how do we take like data, four-letter word related to AI? How do we take that data and apply it in the context of the current environment? And
Right.
that, I think, is where the speciality of an appraiser and that human in the loop and their direct knowledge becomes ever more important.
That's right. Yeah, and as far as a co-thinker, that co-thinker theme, I think that the AI processes can help with kind of organizing that, doing some of that validation. To a degree, there's a lot of stare and compare that people like to talk about that we're trying to eliminate as much as we can. But if we were to look at it as a curation cycle and use the abilities that AI can offer us, and even if we network that, I think everybody's trying to figure out how to use AI for themselves. And then the next step is how do we network that intelligence to somebody else? And so we've got an integration with Shield Hub for background checks. And this model is fantastic to me. They've quantified a background into a score. Then they monitor it for some sort of change. And if that change happens, we get a webhook that says, hey, there's a change that took place. And it triggers maybe a human in the middle to go and do that individual assessment about what had taken place. But think about permits with the local municipality for a property. If that were to occur, then there might be a change on the other side of that property. And wouldn't it be cool if there was some sort of AI interpretation of, hey, this is a new septic system?
An awareness that it took place,
It
right?
took place.
Yes.
And so
Or that
that,
it's pending and therefore you can ask better questions. It's
uh-huh,
leveling up because in essence for me when I use the terminology level up with the lens of AI, it's really about understanding to ask better questions and in turn getting an ultimate better result.
exactly. And, I think that all of that coming from a Cisco background, we started with networking inside of the office and then how do we extend it out? I think that AI, certainly we've got artificial general intelligence as a target, but I think for the type of AI that we have right now, being able to transcend kind of your individual domains, your organization's domains to be able to interact kind of like an extranet for agents, for agentic networks. That's going to be an interesting thing to me. I'm excited about it.
Well, I was going to say, you're making me smile because the language you just used tells me that we need to schedule we need to schedule a follow up. And not only that, but in the context of what you've shared today, curation has the letters AI in it too. So you've added a new word.
Excellent.
And what we didn't talk about, but we'll come back and visit this in a future episode, but you have a technology background that I think lends uniquely to not only what it is you've done in the appraisal space, but how is it that you think about artificial intelligence going forward? So we'll save
Absolutely.
that for another day, but
Okay.
thanks for setting it up. Let's close with one practical tip or fun piece that you've seen AI make a difference, whether it be in your work world or how are you experimenting with it personally?
Well, collectively, my tribe, my family, friends, etc., what I've noticed is that instead of, hey, I'm going to Google that, it's now I'm going to chat that. I'm going to use chat for that. So it seems like that there has just been this kind of everywhere. Everybody is, instead of doing a Google search, we're all doing AI queries to kind of quickly prime whatever thought that we're having or answer whatever questions we have. But as far as how lifescape impacts occur, right now, I am experiencing the sandwich generation. So I've got three parents that are all just striving, but they're at the age that they start having medical issues. I'm getting old enough that I have some, and have a son that's in college. And so on all sides, we're seeing a lot of health stuff. And I use AI for co-thinking regarding medical data that we get back in my chart. I can pull that down and feed it in and do a little bit of query and questioning about what's going on. I can pull in context of other doctor appointments or conversation topics. But the most important thing I get out of it, I'm not going to Dr. Google. I'm not going to Dr. Chat GPT. What I'm doing is trying to queue up those questions and be ready for that conversation with the doctor.
For that conversation with the actual medical professional. And again, I'm going to just make one clarifier as well because the privacy and the data because surrounding the medical component of things is so important on so many levels. And I know your technical background.
Mhm.
So I know when you're sharing, you're doing these things, you're doing it within guardrails that
Absolutely.
protect that privacy and security. So
That's right.
I just want to add that little disclaimer, so to speak, for the default. You're
Yeah.
knowing your default and how that can be used effectively for others as well.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. But the notion is that if you can get that collection of insight or sometimes it's totally the wrong answer. And so it's definitely not a reliable source of data, but it's that co-thinking where you're struggling to figure out, how do I get beyond this complexity so that I can start digesting it and
Right.
be ready for those conversations, and not only ready for the conversations, but ready for the answers.
And I think you bring up a good point from the complexity standpoint. Is that one way that we can prompt a GPT, whatever model you happen to use, is to get the answer, but then say, describe this to me as a freshman in college. Describe this to me as a
Right.
10-year-old.
That's right.
Right? Like, you give it more reference for how do you want the information to be delivered to you, and it can help absolutely reduce some of the complexity
Yes.
associated with it.
Yeah. But it's a powerful tool, and that has altered my lifescape, and it certainly has helped tame the bear quite a bit.
Right. Well, thank you, Chris. So grateful that you're able to join us today, and look forward to our next curation and future of what you see coming forward. Thanks
That
again
sounds
for
cool.
and for, most importantly, leaning into possible, right?
Yes, absolutely. You've taught me
Thank
that
you.
for sure. Thank you.